This is another opportunity to go against Haaland, but is it worth it? Let's analyse the data to find out. The man himself faces Brighton at home this game week, and his two challengers are Son against Fulham at home and Salah against Everton at home in the Merseyside derby. They're both midfielders, so they get the extra point per goal scored, and they've got the clean sheet point potential as well. We'll start by taking a look at the non-penalty stats per 90 minutes for this season. Immediately we can see that Son's got the highest return rate, and it does help that he's an elite finisher, so he is expected to overperform his underlying stats, but to be fair, so are the other two players. He's not got the most promising underlying stats. In fact, he's got the least promising. It's Haaland who's got the most promising, and they're better at projecting future return points than actual return points themselves. So although Salah's output hasn't been as high as Son's, it is actually more sustainable. They're the non-penalty stats. Both Haaland and Salah are on penalty duties. However, it is questionable whether Son's on penalty duties or not. He is the talisman at Spurs, but it could still be Maddison or Richarlison because they've got better penalty records in previous years. None of the players on the shortlist have indirect free kicks or corners. There is a chance that Son could take a direct free kick. He does face competition off Porro and Maddison though. Moving on to the probability, Haaland's got the highest anytime goal scorer odds this game week by quite a margin. Salah's got the highest anytime assist odds, but it doesn't quite compensate. Haaland's got the highest anytime return odds. But one thing that does compensate for Salah is the fact that he gets an extra point per goal scored, so if you consider the weighted odds, there's not much between them. Actually, this is factored into the points projections. Haaland's got the highest overall on Fantasy Football Fix by 0.1 ahead of Salah, and it's exactly the same on FPL Review, where he's 0.1 ahead of Salah again. So it's practically neck and neck when the expected value difference is this low, but don't take anything away from Haaland, he does top the charts. Looking at the opposition, I wouldn't really say there's much between the three this game week. Brighton, Fulham and Everton all have poor defences, and it's quite shocking to see the Brighton numbers so bad because they were quite decent last season. It would be unfair to say that Everton's got the best defence out of all three teams just after 8 fixtures because that is a small sample size, but looking at the expected numbers, Everton have held up much better than the other two teams. But to be fair, the clean sheet odds for Everton and Brighton are exactly the same, and when it comes to data models, City's attack is rated slightly higher than Liverpool's, so this implies that Everton's defence is slightly worse. It's actually Fulham's defence that's got the least promising numbers because of the expected numbers, and like I mentioned earlier with the players, this is better at projecting future goals conceded than actual goals conceded themselves, and obviously the Spurs attack isn't quite as good as Liverpool's or City's, so the clean sheet odds are expected to be slightly higher for Fulham. You could even argue that they've got the easiest fixture. Either way, there's barely anything to split them, especially with all three players having the home advantage. Before I draw up a conclusion, we're going to carry out a quick risk assessment. All three players feature for their respective nations, and they all played 90 minutes in the last match, but have had an adequate amount of resting days. All the expected minutes look reliable. Son's is slightly lower because when he came off at half time for South Korea, it did look like he might be carrying an injury, but he did proceed to play through the full 45 minutes after that, and he was completely fine. Of course, nothing is 100% certain. That's why Haaland and Salah themselves have 87 expected minutes and not 90, but with that slight risk being there, it has reduced Son's expected minutes. He might get an early sub, or might not even start, but that is a tiny risk. Now it's time to draw up a conclusion. I'd say the top two candidates are Haaland and Salah this game week. I wouldn't blame you for captaining either of those two players because I don't think there's much between them. But from what I've seen, I believe that Haaland slightly edges it. If you found this video informative, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like this, and the team selection video will be published shortly.